My name is Ethan Brooks, and I've owned my home in a quiet Texas suburban neighborhood for over 8 years. It wasn't a luxury estate, just a comfortable 2-story house with a decent yard, a driveway, and a sense of peace I worked hard to maintain. That peace ended the day my new neighbors moved in. At first, they seemed normal. A couple in their late 40s, a moving truck, a few loud arguments during unpacking. Nothing unusual for a new family settling in. I even waved at them on the second day. They didn't wave back. That should have been my first warning. Within a week, I noticed something strange. Surveyors arrived at their property, then construction workers, then heavy equipment. I assumed they were remodeling the house, until I saw the foundation layout. They weren't just renovating. They were building something massive. A garage, but not just any garage. One that was positioned directly along our shared property line. I didn't think much of it, until I noticed the angle. It was pointing toward my driveway. The first real concern came when I walked outside early one morning and saw string lines stretched from their construction site, extending beyond their property boundary, right into my driveway space. I walked over immediately. "Hey," I called out to one of the workers. "You might want to double-check those lines. That's my driveway." He looked up, shrugged, and said, "We are just following the plans." "What plans?" I asked, but he didn't answer. That was my second warning. That evening, I went next door. A man named Robert opened the door. He looked tired, irritated, and already defensive. "Can I help you?" he said. "I think your construction is crossing into my driveway space," I said calmly. He smiled slightly. "No, it's not. We checked. Everything is within our boundary." I pulled out my phone and showed him the survey map. "This is my property line." He glanced at it briefly, then said something I didn't expect. "Old surveys are often inaccurate." That moment changed everything, because now it wasn't ignorance. It was denial. Construction continued the next day, and the next, until I noticed something alarming. The garage wasn't just close to my driveway. It was being designed with an overhang, a structure that, when complete, would literally extend above part of my driveway space, meaning vehicles entering my property would be partially under their structure. That was not just aggressive. That was deliberate. I contacted the city building department immediately, filed a formal complaint, requested an emergency inspection. But construction didn't stop. If anything, it accelerated. Concrete pouring began. Framing went up. And within days, the structure started taking shape. A garage door facing my driveway, opening directly toward my access path, like my driveway was part of their design. Then came the HOA involvement. Of course there was an HOA. They sent me a letter stating, "Shared Neighborhood Design A." Then came the HOA involvement. Of course there was an HOA. They sent me a letter stating, "Shared Neighborhood Design Alignment encourages efficient space utilization." I read that sentence 3 times. Shared space? My driveway? No. My attorney got involved next. And when he reviewed the blueprints, he didn't hesitate. "This is a boundary encroachment disguised as construction planning," he said. "Can we stop it?" I asked. He nodded. "But we need inspection intervention." So we pushed harder. That's when the building inspector finally arrived. A quiet man, middle-aged, no emotion, clipboard in hand. He walked slowly around the construction site, measured, checked plans, compared lines. Then he walked toward the garage foundation and stopped for a long time. "What's the issue?" the contractor asked nervously. The inspector didn't answer immediately. He walked directly to the edge of the structure, looked at the property markers, then looked at my driveway, and finally said, "This is not compliant." Silence. The contractor tried to argue. "We followed HOA-approved design." The inspector raised his hand. "This is not about HOA." That sentence hit differently, because now authority had entered the room. Within minutes, everything changed. The inspector ordered a temporary stop work notice. All construction halted immediately. Workers stepped back, tools down. No exceptions. But the real moment came when he called me over. He pointed at the garage layout. "This section extends beyond permitted boundary clearance." Then added, "It cannot open into your driveway space. Not legally. Not under any code." That was it. The entire design collapsed in seconds. The next few days were chaos. The neighbors argued. The HOA tried to intervene. Contractors demanded explanations. But nothing mattered anymore. Because once a building inspector issues a violation notice, everything becomes official. The garage construction was officially suspended, then partially dismantled, then redesigned completely. No driveway access overlap, no boundary intrusion, no overhang, just a standard garage confined to their property. After everything settled, I stood in my driveway one evening. Quiet again. No workers. No noise. No tension. Just normal suburban silence. And I realized something important. People often assume space is flexible until authority defines it. But property lines aren't opinions. They are limits. After the stop work order was issued, I thought the situation would finally calm down. But I underestimated how far people will go when they feel entitled to something that was never theirs. Because 2 days later, I woke up to noise outside my house again. Not construction noise this time. Argument noise. I stepped outside and saw Robert standing near the halted garage site, yelling at the inspector who had returned for a follow-up check. The inspector looked calm, but firm. "I already issued the violation. You cannot continue construction until boundary compliance is corrected." Robert snapped back. "This is ridiculous. The HOA approved everything." The inspector didn't even raise his voice. The HOA does not override city code. That sentence hung in the air like a final verdict. But what happened next surprised me. Instead of fixing the design, Robert escalated. He hired a private consultant surveyor. A man who arrived with a laser, measuring device and confidence that didn't match reality. I watched from my driveway as he began marking new points on the ground. Closer, closer to my property line. Then I walked over. "You're on my land," I said. He didn't look up. According to our adjusted interpretation, the boundary shifts slightly due to easement ambiguity. That was the first time I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was desperate. I immediately called my attorney. Within hours, he arrived with updated certified survey documents. Stamped. Filed. Legally binding. He placed them directly in front of the consultant. "This is the official county record," my attorney said calmly. "Not your interpretation." The consultant went silent. For the first time, he stopped measuring. But the real problem wasn't him. It was the HOA, because they refused to accept the shutdown. Instead, they sent a formal appeal letter to the city claiming community infrastructure necessity, historical driveway shared access, minimal structural impact. My attorney looked at the letter and shook his head. This is not legal argument. This is emotional framing. Meanwhile, construction pressure shifted again. Even though the garage was halted, workers still showed up daily, just standing, observing, as if waiting for permission that would never come. That alone became harassment. So I installed additional cameras, motion detection, night recording, full perimeter coverage. Because at this point, it wasn't construction anymore. It was surveillance disguised as persistence. Then came the breaking point. One morning, I found new markings painted near my driveway entrance. Not construction lines, but boundary indicators. Fresh paint. Inside my property edge. That was intentional trespass. Not mistake. Not confusion. Violation. Didn't argue this time. I didn't visit them. I sent everything directly to the city enforcement office. Photos, coordinates, time stamps, video evidence. And within 24 hours, the inspector returned. But this time, he was not alone. 2 code enforcement officers were with him. Robert tried to defend himself again. We were correcting survey confusion. The inspector looked at the markings, then at the documents, then at me, and finally said, "This is not confusion. This is non-compliance continuation." That was the turning point. A formal penalty notice was issued, then a mandatory removal order for all encroaching markers, then a second stop work extension, stricter this time, with fines attached, real financial consequences. That's when the HOA backed off, slightly, but not completely, because instead of fighting legally now, they shifted strategy again. Social pressure. Neighbors started whispering, "It's just a driveway. He's being difficult. It's not that serious." That pattern again. Minimize, normalize pressure. But I stayed consistent. No confrontation. Only documentation. Because I learned something important. You don't win these situations by reacting emotionally. You win by making everything recordable. Weeks passed. The garage structure remained half-built, frozen, like a reminder of overreach. Then slowly, workers stopped coming. Equipment was removed, and silence returned. One evening, I stood in my driveway and looked at the incomplete structure. What was supposed to be a shared assumption had become a legal warning sign. And I realized something simple. People don't stop when they're wrong. They stop when continuing becomes too expensive.